The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. For a century, they came for our land. Then they came for our gold. Today, they are coming for our DNA and our digital sovereignty. But February 25, 2026, Zimbabwe did something that most African leaders are too afraid to do. They slammed the door. President Mnangagwa just rejected 367 million US dollars from the United States. Why? Because Zimbabwe realized that this wasn't a gift, it was a ransom note for the nation's future. To understand why Zimbabwe said no, you have to understand the history of Western aid. In the 1800s, colonialists came with Bibles and beads promising civilization while they mapped our minerals. Today, they come with health and vaccines promising development while they map our genetic data. Historically, aid has been used as a neo-colonial tool. Think about the 1990 structural adjustment programs. They gave loans, but in return, they forced us to sell our hospitals and mines to foreign companies. We got the aid, but they got the infrastructure. We got the debt, but they got the wealth. As the proverb says, a man who gives you a free coat is usually looking to see where you keep your wallet. This 367 million US dollars deal was part of the American First Global Health Strategy. Listen to the name. It tells you exactly who comes first. The US demanded direct access to Zimbabwe's sensitive health data and virus samples for 5 years. They wanted the raw materials of African biology to create new billion-dollar vaccines. When Zimbabwe asked, will we get these vaccines for free since we are using our data? The US said no. When Zimbabwe asked for access to US health data in return, they said no. The mineral link. The US even tried to sneak in clauses to access to Zimbabwe's lithium and strategic minerals. They wanted to use a health deal to secure the mineral needed for Western electric cars. It was a 21st century haste disguised as a doctor's visit. The mentally enslaved will tell you that Zimbabwe is being difficult. They will say the country needs the 367 million. Mnangagwa administration realizes that 367 million is nothing compared to the trillion of dollars in data and minerals they were trying to take.
The government of Zimbabwe has taken a rare bold step, rejecting a U.S. funding deal. The administration of President Emmerson Mnangagwa turned down the 367 million US dollar help funding from Washington due to concerns over sovereignty and national control. That package, which could have been the single largest health investment by any international partner in Zimbabwe in recent years, is now off the table. U.S. Ambassador to Zimbabwe Pamela Tremont also confirmed that negotiations had collapsed, saying Zimbabwean authorities had assured the U.S. that they are prepared to continue the fight against diseases such as HIV, TB, and malaria independently. Local media in Zimbabwe reports that the rejection of the controversial U.S. initiative was ordered by President Mnangagwa. One of the contentious points in the deal is about giving the U.S. access to Zimbabwe's national health data, including pathogen samples and epidemiological information from Zimbabweans in exchange for the 367 million US dollars funding package. Zimbabwe's Herald newspaper quoted Secretary for Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Service Nick Mangwana as saying partnership must be built on a foundation of mutual respect, transparency and reciprocal benefit, and that the proposed deal with the U.S. did not meet this fundamental criterion. Zimbabwean officials also rejected other conditions attached to the agreement. These include giving the U.S. greater access to Zimbabwe's critical mineral resources. The Southern African country expressed concern that such provisions could give Washington strategic control over sectors vital to Zimbabwe's long-term economic independence. While Zimbabwe turns away American funding, Many African countries on the continent have accepted it, including Nigeria, the continent's most populous country, and Kenya, which has now suspended its own version of the deal due to a court case against it, after concerns were raised over granting the U.S. access to sensitive health data. Washington says 16 African nations have signed such health deals under Trump's America First global health strategy, involving about $18.3 billion US dollars funding to fight infectious diseases on the continent. The initiative replaces health programs previously implemented under USAID, with more focus now on American interest as part of the Trump's administration's transactional foreign policy. It's not working for us, for our country, it's to your advantage, and so because of that, we're not taking it and we want it cancelled. So they have said no to the deal was $350 million. The proposal was $350 million, which was supposed to be a health funding agreement with the U.S. And President Mnangagwa personally directed that his government must discontinue with the negotiations over what Harare describes as a one-sided deal that undermines the country's sovereignty. This is I think this is beautiful to see that there are African presidents who are taking action and respecting the sovereignty of the African people and the African countries. However, there are other nations and presidents who, for some weird reasons, even when their citizens say no to some of these deals, they go ahead and sign, even when they undermine the deals of the country. Now, this is not the first country where the U.S. was signing these health deals. Countries like Uganda, Kenya have actually signed up for these health deals. There were complaints. Actually, for the story in Kenya, the case is there's still an ongoing case in court because people felt the issue of sharing data health was not going to work for Kenyans and was going to expose the country's sovereignty. However, the government was okay with signing the deal. And so this is one of the reasons Zimbabwe has said, you know what? We're not signing this. We're actually cancelling. So the Secretary for Foreign Affairs and International Trade of Zimbabwe, by the name Albert Chimbidi, communicated that the directive to the Secretaries of Finance and Health in a letter that was actually dated December 23rd, 2025. So in the letter, he said, the president has directed that Zimbabwe must discontinue any negotiation with the USA on the clearly lopsided MOU that blatantly compromises and undermines the sovereignty and independence of Zimbabwe as a country. Did you hear that? Imagine a president taking a stand and saying anything that is going to compromise the independence of a country, the sovereignty, and undermining that, we're not going to sign it because of that. There are this good, the US will sell that we have all this good, we're putting in this money, it will help with these projects. But when you put the pros and cons, they realize that for their country, it was being undermined. And the US was going to benefit more from that deal than the country that was meant to receive. The aid was going to benefit. So the MOU, or the Memorandum of Understanding, was being promoted by Washington as the future framework for US health support to Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe is choosing the WHO, World Health Organization, over bilateral deals. Why? Because multilateralism protects the small. Bilateral deals protect the bully. It is better to sleep hungry and free than to be a fat slave at the master's table. Zimbabwe is choosing the hard path of self-reliance, just like Captain Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso and Osman Sonko awakening. The door is shutting across Africa. The youth are waking up. We are realizing that aid is often just a down payment on our own resources. If your neighbor offered to pay your hospital bill, but only if they could own your house and read your private diary, will you take the deal? That is what the US offered Zimbabwe. And for once, an African leader had the courage to say, keep your money. We will keep our dignity. The eye that is open can never be fooled by the hand that is hidden. Zimbabwe eyes are open. Are yours? I am so excited that for once the African leader has been bold enough to reject something of the sort. This thing is happening in other parts of Africa, because there are some African countries that have signed this deal to give out our data, our sensitive data, to the United States of America for years. Like, at the end of the day, you hear these people in African Union, ANC, SADC, and all these regional organizations, blocs, talking about African unity, stopping colonialism, we need to be free, we need to own the narrative. You can't own the narrative when you keep giving out our data to these people to manufacture and bring it back here, sell it to us. Africans are always used as guinea pigs, and who allows that is the same leaders who are singing African solution to the African problem. And these are things we want African Union to stop. But when it comes to these things, African Union can see. African Union can only see the size of a map. African Union can only see that we are having insecurity in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso because we have military leaders. Leaders who are fighting for the total liberation of the African. Leaders who are nationalizing their resources. Leaders that are making sure that they close the doors to imperialism. Leaders who are making sure that we own the narrative. Leaders that are making sure that the African is no longer a subject to inferior being. These are the leaders. You find the same African leaders in African Union speaking the same language, going after, and you wonder if truly these leaders are actually working in the interest of Africa. But sometimes we have to understand African Union, because if 70%, about 70%, according to the former African Union chairperson, about 70% of their funds come from their international partners. You understand that partnership? You understand? When they are not funding them, they have names and adjectives they use in describing them. When it is money they are receiving from them, it is partners, international partners. So we understand them. But if we continue to be doing the same thing, we can never get anywhere. We can be in Africa, yet our health data is somewhere and people will use it for their own benefit. But for now, we are so happy and glad that Amanasa Mnangagwa is rising to protect the lives of our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. This is what we call leadership. This is what we want our African leaders to be doing. If the United States of America is asking for our data, we should also ask for the data of the United States of America. These people can never go to China, Russia, Korea. It's only in Africa. Whosoever that wants to text anything, it must be in Africa. If they develop something and they want to do this, they must come to Africa. Africa has become... we don't even know what to say anymore, how to describe this. We are something that people like... It seems our lives don't matter to our leaders. At least show us that you are leaders that cares. You will never see Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso leaders signing this kind of a deal to give out their sensitive health data. And that is why Captain Ibrahim Traore did everything possible to make sure that their data don't leave the shores of Africa. So why do we have leaders who are speaking grammar, big grammar? You know how Pan-African these our leaders are. They can speak and melt your heart. Let them leave African Union, that meeting, and everything changes. But we are grateful that at least some of them are rising, and then we hope that the president of Zimbabwe will do more for his people. And at least let us fight for the total liberation of Africa. We deserve everything. If they are treating Africans anyhow, it's not only us, so forget about how you go and they receive you. As long as you are in the dark skin, the treatment they give to the people you are leading and you see them to be ordinary citizens, is the same thing they are giving to you in a very disguised way that you can barely see. So we are all being treated the same way. And as long as you are leading us, you need to also add value to us. It's not about adding value to the resources, but even to the people you are leading. It's very important. And adding value to us is what the president of Zimbabwe just did. Africa, we are getting somewhere. And we are glad that our leaders are listening to what we are calling them to do. We know we'll not get all of them to get to where we are going to, but at least, and under that system called demo, you can never do anything. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we'll make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world in Africa, Southern Africa, and in Zimbabwe.